Alright everyone, this is Stammer On and welcome back to another video on the channel that's all about stammering, stuttering and everything in between. And for this video, I wanted to talk about a topic that's been coming up a lot in the stuttering community, and that is Bridgerton. Bridgerton is a Netflix series which is set in like a Regency, England, in like a late Georgian period. I'm not going to do like a full run down of the whole plot of the series. Go and watch it if you're curious. However, the kind of spoiler warnings do apply because I will be talking about stuff from all of the episodes. And the reason I wanted to talk about it was that there's one character within this series who has a stutter. And normally this would be an interesting thing, but not necessarily something to make a video on. However, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because it's had a bit of a mixed reception within the stuttering community, and I find that quite interesting. Because on the one hand, I've seen a lot of people praising it as a realistic representation of stuttering, and a good representation for us as people who stutter to look at. However, on the flip side, I've seen some people criticising it because it's another instance of the same trope, which we see in media over and over and over again. So I'm going to be looking at two things within this video. I'm going to be looking at, firstly, is it realistic? And secondly, even if it is realistic, is this a message that we want to keep pushing out about stuttering? Something can be realistic but still be damaging to a community. I want to look at a few aspects of Simon Stutter. I want to look at the cause, at the apparent cure, and at what conclusions we can take away from this. So first of all, the cause of Simon Stutter. In the show, it does not explicitly say what the cause of his stutter is. All we see is that when he's a small child, and when he's being educated, he does not speak. And then when he speaks for the first time, he speaks with a very, very pronounced stutter. In the time period which this is set, Regency England, there wasn't a lot of awareness about stuttering. People didn't understand it, and the Duke's immediate assumption is that Simon's an idiot. Even though his nurse, his teacher at the time, says no, he's very intelligent, he's learned all of these other things. The very fact that Simon is struggling to speak is enough to indicate that he's not intelligent enough to carry on the Hastings line. And that's an issue. However, that is also realistic to the time period though, so I'm fine with that representation being in there and that assumption being there, because it would have been there in that time period. And it would have been assumed that there was something wrong with Simon for not being able to speak properly. In Simon's house, his father is desperate for a child and desperate to have a son who can carry on the Hastings lineage. And then he has Simon. And then after Simon's born, doesn't really talk to him. And Simon's mother dies in childbirth, so Simon's kind of left on his own. And it would be very easy to read into the fact that Simon stutters because he's isolated and because he's been neglected. However, at the age that Simon's at, it is more likely that he just has a developmental stammer. And a developmental stammer is one that comes on as a child begins to speak, and it's just part of their natural development. And about 5% of children stammer. However, if the stammer continues after the age of 5, then about 1% of those children will go on to stammer for the rest of their lives. Even though, I said, coming from this home where he is isolated would not have caused his stammer, it probably didn't help his stammer. If you grow up in an environment where you don't feel like you can stammer, and you feel like you're going to get judged for it, you feel like you may even get rejected by your father for it, then those nerves and that anxiety is going to build, and it's going to make it more likely that your stammer will be more pronounced and will cause you more issues. And that's just a natural part of the psychological side of stammering. Like, the more het up we get, the more nervous we are, the more we try not to stammer, like the more likely we are to stammer. So therefore, even though it wasn't caused by his circumstances probably didn't help. And then moving on to like the cure. Like kind of Simon, like when we meet him like as an adult, doesn't appear to stammer anymore. And this could just be, oh, like he grew out of it. However, like the show explicitly says like, kind of, that he worked on it. After Lady Danbury finds him like in his schooling room and decides to take him away, like and take him under her wing, and we see him years later and he's able to speak to his father and able to stand up to his father. Like, it's not immediate. Like, we do see a scene where he still has issues and is still working on it. And again, this is realistic. It takes time. It's not an instant like kind of switch off process. However, as an adult, he appears to come back and it's completely gone. And in a conversation which Lady Danbury and Daphne have at the end of the first series, it is stated like that, like kind of Simon like kind of worked really hard on his speech and was able to overcome it. And this and this is where the damaging narrative for people who stutter comes in, because I guarantee like there will be some people that have seen this representation and then looked at someone who stutters, whether a friend or a family member, and either thought it or said to them, I wonder why you weren't able to get over it. I wonder why this didn't work for you. I wonder like if you just tried harder, maybe you would be fluent. And oh my god, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that if I just tried harder I'd be fluent and that would fit your standards. Also, firstly, ableist as hell, like, because it assumes that everybody wants to be fluent and everybody wants to meet these like societal standards of what is proper, what is correct, what is right, what is normal. And in this day and age, normal is subjective. What is normal? Normal is what media's pushed on us. And like the way I speak is normal for me. And yeah, I could force myself to be fluent, but that wouldn't be normal for me. It would be normal for you, and maybe that would be more acceptable. But I would be forcing myself to do something that isn't natural for me. And that's where the issue comes in. This pushes the narrative of like how people with disabilities like kind of can and should fix themselves because society thinks it's more acceptable. And I'm sorry, rant ahead, but why should we have to? Why should we have to meet these standards? We already are the ones who are at a disadvantage, and you're telling us that we need to change ourselves further just to make it easier for you when it's already easier for you. Just take that in for a moment. And that's where the issue lies for me. It's the idea that, oh, like you're so successful like now that you've got rid of your disability. And again, like looking at Bridgerton in the time period it's set, makes sense. This is how they would have thought, but it still annoys me. Because the viewers of this series are not from Regency England. The viewers of this series are from the 21st century, like where we should be portraying a more rounded approach to disability and what a disability is. And my real worry is like that people are going to go away from this series and think, oh, people who stutter are able to be fluent if they just try hard enough. And like, firstly, some people who stutter aren't able to do that, and that's fine. And they shouldn't be shamed and made to feel like they're lesser because they can't. And secondly, as I'm about to go on to say, even those people who stutter who can pass as fluent aren't always happy when they're forced to do so. So moving on to the next section of my little rant. This is far rantier than I thought it would be. So moving on to the next part of this, the assumption is that like Simon has been cured. Simon has not been cured. Simon has become like what is known in the stuttering community as a covert person who stutters. And what this means is like kind of covert stammering, like, is when you still have a stammer. It's just you're doing everything in your power not to show that to the outside world. And there's a few different ways they can do this. They can either choose not to speak, and if they think they're going to stutter, they can choose to completely restructure their sentences as they're saying them in order to avoid anything that might make them stutter. They can switch up their whole vocabulary to make sure that they're not stuttering. And it is very intelligent and very sophisticated, but very, very exhausting. And it means that those people who stammer, in those moments where they are being covert and they're using these techniques, they are completely focused on their speech and their speech alone. And they're not in the moment a lot of the time. Like they're not always listening to what's being said to them because they're thinking about what their response is going to be. And like arguably like, as well, they're not being genuine with the people they're talking to, particularly if those people are people they're close to. Like because rather than being open and being comfortable and being vulnerable around that person, they're constantly putting up this shield and putting up this wall. And that can be very hard for people to break through. And this is what we see with Simon. Like Simon from the start, when he comes back to London, has a shield up. He is pretending to be this haughty duke who doesn't want to be around anybody who is above everything that's happening. And this is a persona that he has clearly cultivated for himself. And his stammer is part of this. His stammer being hidden and not being visible is part of this. And it may look like he's just a strong silent type who's taking everything in and listening. However, this could very easily be part of his covert tendency. And in fact, like, I'm going to do like a follow-up video like where like I look at the book, like where we see that this is very much what is happening here. There is also like one moment like where we do see his stammer come out. And this is in a scene like where he realises that he has feelings for Daphne. And looking at her like across the room, he goes to talk to Lady Danbury and he blocks. And this is a moment that is a blink and you miss it moment. And in fact, like my flatmate missed it. However, for me, as a person who stammers, and as somebody who was looking out for this kind of moment, it was really great to see because we saw it come out again like in a moment of emotion and vulnerability. And that's realistic. That's how stammers work. And it came out in this moment and that was great. However, this was the only instance where it happened. And I hope that this isn't the only time that Simon felt emotional and vulnerable. Because this is before he gets married, before he has a child, and he's never been emotional again. Like this is the one time where he's emotional enough to stammer. It says something about the fact that he seems to constantly have his guard up. The fact that he's never able to stammer around Daphne and never able to show that side to her. Yes, again, in the time period, showing that vulnerability probably wasn't the thing to do. But if it's your wife and you love her, why not show her all of yourself? And yeah, there are people who stammer who haven't done this. There are people who stammer who are covert and are functionally fluent, even in front of their wives, their partners, but are constantly exhausted and have never had a genuine conversation with their partner. And I'm not saying this for all people who are covert, but there are people who are covert that this is the case for. And if we know that Simon's stammer is more severe, it would be nice to see it coming out more in those moments to show his emotion and to show that it is still there, he is still affected, and to show that that wall is coming down, like for Daphne, or even for Anthony or for Lady Danbury. And the fact that that wall is coming down in front of people he cares about would be really, really nice to see. In conclusion, I feel like this is a really hard path to tread. Because I'm complaining that we have a realistic representation of stuttering, which isn't showing enough. It's almost like I can't be happy with anything. Because it's not that this is not a realistic representation of stuttering. It is. There are people who stutter, who are like this, who use these techniques, who are functionally fluent. However, in a situation like this, where the main audience are not people who stutter, and people who don't stutter are going to come away from this thinking things about stuttering that are not true. And that's what I would have liked to see more of the background, more of the emotion behind it. And it's a very hard thing to do, in a television series. I'm aware of that. And again, in my video, where I'm looking at the book, I'm going to do a comparison, of how, showing Simon's emotions in the book really helps to drive this point home more, that his stammer is still there. And also, I understand that as somebody with a disability, we don't want a character to be all about their disability. We don't want the stutter to be all Simon is. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking for a bit more. I'm asking for a bit more clarity, a bit more explanation. And just to show a more balanced perspective on what stuttering is, because they had the opportunity to do that and they didn't. So it would be nice in the second series, as he becomes more comfortable with Daphne, if we did start to see that coming out a bit more. And what we have a chance to do with this is have him open up to Daphne and reveal more of himself to her. Or even if she notices him kind of trying to avoid or trying not to stutter, tell him it's okay. And reassure him that he's still lovable, even with the stutter. I'm not asking for too much. I just want you to give me something so that people who don't stutter don't think we can be cured by trying hard enough. Is that too much to ask? Please. I'm aware that a lot of people are intelligent enough to know that not a whole group is represented by one person. However, that does not stop it from happening. You see stuff like the film Split, what it's done to the DID community, stuff like Rain Man, what it's made people think of autistic people. These are the kind of narratives which people still bring out and be like, oh yeah, I understand that because I've seen this one film. It happens, as much as people are intelligent and people can use critical thinking, it does happen. So that's why I wanted to address this. Especially with a topic which is not well known and is not covered very often within media. It's important to when these kind of things do come out, just talk about it and educate, which is what I'm hoping to do here today. And we can't assume that every viewer is going to critically appraise everything they watch for, is this realistic? Because why should they? It's entertainment. They're just enjoying the show. And this is the issue we're running into now with stuttering, in that almost every single representation of a stutter on television is shown in the same way, or the same couple of ways. And that is either that person stutters because they're not that intelligent, because they're not competent, or that person stutters and then they overcome it. And this is the narrative which Bridgerton is falling into. Because the constant narrative we're seeing within Bridgerton, and even in the real world with President Biden, we're seeing people who stammer being praised for overcoming and for passing as fluent. But that doesn't mean it's not damaging for the rest of us who aren't able to do that. And the idea that that we are not of value until we pass as fluent is inherently damaging and inherently ableist. It seems that people who are covert are happy with their speech and are comfortable in their speech, and they're not. Most people who are covert, who I know, are just as focused on, and in fact, in some cases, even more unhappy with their speech than people who like accept their stammers. And like, because they're constantly thinking about it, they're constantly worrying about how they're going to say something next and whether or not they will stammer when they do it. And that's no way to live either. Because here's the thing, they haven't cured themselves. That they've just learned to pass to meet societal expectations. And that is fine if that is something that they want to do. However, we cannot keep pushing this narrative of, oh, they've overcome and they're fine now. Because they are not. Like, they may be fine with their stammer, but they're putting in so much effort and so much work, and that is just being cast aside as, oh, you're fine now. And we need to educate more about this type of stammering. And I would love to see Bridgerton like, kind of use this like, as an excuse to educate a bit more on that. I know they have like a diversity team behind this show, so why not bring in some people who stutter to actually contribute and to help? I'm going to leave that rant here for now. That was far rantier than I thought it was going to be, and I apologise. As I say, I do want to come back and do a side-by-side comparison like, with the book, where we can look at like how the book paints like a different, like a more nuanced side of Simon Stutter, and whether this is possible to bring across into the television show or not. Because obviously like it's hard to convey stuff like thoughts and internal monologue within a show, but there are things they can do in order to introduce those suggestions. And if you're interested in that, then please check back to see that. In the meantime, I will just say thank you very much for coming along for this rant. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like. Anything you want to comment on, please comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Am I insane? Or is this a thing that I'm allowed to be a bit peeved about? Please let me know what you think. Please hit the subscribe button, if you want to see more from me. As I say, I will have another Bridgerton video coming out soon. And also, I do lots of content around stammering and stuttering awareness, so please come along for the ride. All of my socials as well are going to be down in the description. And I will see you in the next one.